Anthropology is the study of cultures. So like you study and you look at one culture. So you'll take the study of man, you'll take a culture in a microcosm, and you'll study everything about that culture from their beliefs, their rituals, their gender relations, how they work, everything about that culture. You like study it in multiple different facets. Sociology is the study of societies and the study of social behaviors within a society. And as we're seeing, as it goes on, both of them are becoming more, they're starting to blur the lines between the two.
So I guess related to this, my name's Doris. I was born in Seoul, South Korea, and my parents adopted me when I was 4 months old, so I've been here ever since. Theater major, education minor, love performance, love cats. My sister's also actually adopted, but from Vietnam, so anything.
My name is Yamilis. My parents are pretty dorky. They've been married for like 27 years. They're both like factory workers. They have pretty, they're like not super heavy Hispanic accents, but like it's kind of there. They both were born in Puerto Rico, came here in their early 20s-ish, moved to North Jersey, eventually kind of met each other, and then found their way to South Jersey.
My name's Aries Harper. I am a junior here at Ohio Wesleyan University. I'm an RA on campus. I am a theater and sociology double major. What else? I don't know. Okay. I'm from Columbus, Ohio. Yeah.
I guess, how would you say that's affected, like, your life, like, being raised in a place that's different from, like, the place where you were specifically born?
I think it's impacted me in a lot of ways. I know some people who are adopted tend to not connect with that part of themselves as much, which is totally fine. It's different for a lot of people. For me in particular, I really always loved getting into touch with that side of me that's adopted, that grew up somewhere else. I mean, that was born somewhere else and grew up here. I've really liked trying to learn more about the culture in which I grew up in, the place in which I keep saying grew up in, was born in. Yeah, and I've always been kind of curious too. There's always like those questions that come up, like, you know, who was my birth mother, who was my birth father, what kind of situation was I born in? And like growing up, it was a little weird just because I was, especially in my elementary school, I was the only Asian kid in a class of like 20. And they would, like, people for the most part, when they got to know me, realized that I was adopted, and I told them a couple times. So people who didn't found it kind of weird that like my parents were white and I was not. So people would see us together and like think and just kind of give us those stares that's like that looks weird. Like why? What is this dynamic here?
I don't know. I don't like being bored, and so I constantly like to do things and be involved. I don't know. I think being engaged, and so working with engagement. I think truly being engaged or enveloped in something is an honor and a privilege, and it helps you not be static. I don't like being static. I don't want to be, I'm just going through the motions. I truly want to learn. I want every day to be different and every day to be special. And so the things that I do every day are very different and very special. And I guess that's what drives me, I guess, to make myself better every day.
Like ever since I was a kid, my family kind of made it like known that I had to not lose part of like the Puerto Rican side of me. And I feel like that kind of has to do with being like a anything American kind of person, because like a lot of the time people make you, like they kind of whitewash you a little, like not trying to be rude, but it's kind of like you have to fit into the norms of like what like normal culture is like, and sometimes you have like a lot of who you are gets lost in that. So like kind of growing up, my parents were like, make sure you don't lose this part of you, make sure like when you grow up you have to pass this on to your kids so you don't lose that. And I think it's mainly so like kind of our culture doesn't get lost as time goes on, but also so we don't forget who we are.
A word that a lot of people use to describe you is intimidating. How do you feel about that?
Well, for one, I hate it partly just because to me it's kind of used as like a shield or like a blocker to get close to me. So instead of actually asking how I feel, or instead of asking or trying to get close to me and trying to figure out, who I am or get to know me, people will just be like, well, you're just really intimidating. Well, like I just can't get close to you. I can't ask you a question because you're really intimidating. And so it's like, I often feel like I'm not treated as a person simply because you're intimidated by me. And I don't know, I don't necessarily know what it is that intimidates people, if it's the fact that I'm direct or that I look at people in the eyes when I talk to them, if I know what I want and so I go after what I want. I don't know. I really don't know, but it irritates me because when it's used as an excuse not to get to know me, or used as this shield of I'll just deflect and, and it's like, whatever.
My 9th grade year was especially difficult. That was the year before I transferred over to Germantown Friends. And I would say some in middle school as well. Mostly it kind of manifested itself in my freshman year of high school, where there would be people that would, I remember some comments where somebody automatically assumed, they went up to me and were like, hey, you're in the ESL class, right? And I was like, no, not really. I've been here for most of my life, thank you. I had a toxic friend who would think that doing the thing where you pull your eyes back to make yourself look Asian was cool, and that's not cool, don't do that. Or I remember a specific comment where we went to a pool party at my friend's house, and since I was in a boot at the time, I couldn't go into the pool, so we were all just kind of fake tanning. Someone would say ding, and we'd roll over. The next day, I went back to school, and I was joking with her. I was like, haha, look how tan I got. And she straight up told me, no, you just got more yellow. So I was like, ow, okay, that really cut.
I've noticed that kind of most people that were not born specifically there, they don't hold such strong ties to it, I guess. It's a part of us, but it's not something that we feel the need to kind of throw around and just say, hey, this needs to be known. But I feel if we were actually from the island, we would be like, hey, I'm from here, you need to know all of the history, you need to know everything about it, and we would kind of make a little bit more of a bigger deal. But I feel that's something that's kind of lost when you're not fully born and raised there.
I'm curious, what made your parents decide to come to the United States? You can answer this in parts from your mother and father's perspective, or however you'd like.
I know from my dad's side of the family, from what he's told me, my grandma she loved to travel, so she frequently goes and travels all the different parts of the U.S. So he eventually found his way to New York and different parts of Jersey, and eventually kind of settled in North Jersey. Whereas my mom, she moved around a lot, and a lot of people don't know this, but Puerto Ricos are very poor, and there's not a lot of resources there. So if you're not doing really well off, you kind of are struggling. So her family kind of traveled around a lot of the U.S., and then she eventually kind of did the same, settled into Jersey, and that's how they both wound up here.
Looking at specifically the way you said intimidating, do you think race is part of that at all?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, yes. Yeah, I think in the sense of when you've grown up in a society where men, specifically black men, have this notion about them that they are superhuman and that they can't be killed, that they can't be stopped unless you use deadly force, it paints the picture that, yeah, so it is a thing of that, people are intimidated by me simply because I'm African American, specifically an African American male. Even no matter, even if I'm not this, really, because I don't think of myself as this large masculine person, but there are still things about me that people will feel intimidated about simply because of my race. And so there are times when I feel like I can't be angry, or not necessarily angry, but I can't be passionate about something or even talk with my hands or raise my voice without people getting upset or becoming scared, as if I'm some angry black man, this trope that has been instilled in a lot of people's minds.
there are things that like I realize that I will never fill. Those questions of, like I mentioned before, like who is my birth mother? I might know, I might not know, I might not ever find out. Who is my birth father? Again, might never know. I use this example in my Tim Miller performance. Was I born in a hospital? Was I born on a bus? Was I born in the backseat of a car? Don't know. Do I have any kind of medical history I should know about? Again, don't know. Yeah, I kind of see those as holes, I guess, in my life, where it's just things that don't feel complete. Like, I'm happy where I am now, I'm happy with what I'm doing, but whenever I kind of think about those, it's just kind of like, ooh, like there's another hole that I might not ever have filled, which is, I've been coping with that through the years and been getting a little bit better at it, so like it's easier for me to open up and talk about now, obviously, but yeah, it's just a kind of, I guess the best way to describe it is feeling incomplete.
I feel like a lot of me is very kind of a big mixture of kind of like every other culture and then like mine. So like I said before, I think the only things that hold me to kind of my Latin roots is just like my family itself, the food and the language. Like other than that, like if you take those things away from me, you kind of like I lost all part of like that.
There is an anthropological term like transracial, which basically refers to someone who, born to a certain environment, was largely grew up in a different environment. What do you think of like that term and its implications?
I think it's pretty accurate to some extent. Like I haven't, I want to do a little bit more research. This is definitely a word that I've been looking to do a little bit more research on, looking more into. But from what I've heard and like it does apply. I think for me personally, I feel like a lot of times being distant from the culture that I was born in, and then growing up in this culture here in America, it's really distanced me a little bit from Korea. I really like to get into touch with that side of me. I remember coming into my new school in 10th grade, there was 2 Korean students there too who were awesome. They became friends pretty quickly. And when I said that I was born in Korea, they got really excited and they started speaking Korean at me. And I was just like, I'm sorry, I don't know any Korean, which kind of surprised them a little bit. I was like, well, I was adopted. I've been here most of my life. So yeah, I think the word in terms of feeling a little distant from where you were born, a little distant from the culture you came from, and then coming here to a completely new one, being immersed in that, it definitely applies.
My name is Jack Douglas Riter. I am a theater creative writing double major, and I produced and directed this documentary. This documentary was originally very different than it ended up being. My initial focus was that I was going to use my own identity as a man of Jewish heritage to look at white supremacy within Ohio. I was particularly influenced by the recent Charlottesville rallies. The day after the rallies, I received multiple unsettling phone calls from friends and families who had had property cars, all sorts of items defaced with swastikas and other forms of hate speech. I originally used my identity as a lens to look into things, but I realized midway through, with the occurrence of the shootings in Vegas, with the recent Polish rallies of nationalism, that the narrative of hate will continue and continue and continue, and people will continue documenting it
so long as it exists, so that my documentary would not simply be a shout into the void. I thought it would be best to reframe my point of view, to focus instead on the individuals and their identities. I was very interested in looking at identity as something which is not only inherent but changeable. I mean, we have our inherent parts of identities, our race, our birth, all of those. And then we have those changeable parts, our ideologies, our presentations. And the way people interact positively or negatively to those was something which I was absolutely fascinated by. My great-great-grandmother was an immigrant, and she was nearly a victim of the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, an incident in which the factory workers sealed the doors shut to prevent workers from leaving early. A fire happened on the floor. Many were burned to death, and at the hearing afterwards, my grandmother Dora, she didn't speak English, so her testimony was given in Hebrew and then translated. I found the transcript and it was absolutely fascinating. The reason I made this documentary is I wanted to ask the question, who are you? And I hope that question's been answered. Thank you all.